It's not showing. Okay. All right. You ready? What's up, everybody? This is Bill Forster, and today in Real Talk Chronicles, we're going to talk about a very serious issue that is happening due to the social distancing, but it's an issue that's been happening, period, for years, and now I think due to social distancing, it's resurfaced again. It's probably another ending topic, but today this panel is just going to try to give you some insight on, what their feelings are. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves and their position. I'm going to start with the gentleman in the purple hat, Mr. Phil Banks. Introduce yourself, sir.
Hey, brothers and sisters. I appreciate the invite onto this particular panel. My name is Phil Banks. I spent almost 30 years in New York City Police Department, but more importantly, I'm a resident and care about the city. And I'd like to come up with some solutions that we can do to carve out some of these problems that we're having. And so thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. I'll go all the way to the other corner. Chet, introduce yourself, please.
What's up, people? We've been trying to do this for a minute, me and Bill trying to get together. My name is Chet Wilson, 20 years NYPD, 9 years at another law enforcement agency, 15 years narcotics, few years in between there with undercover work, ghosting, investigator. We're trying to do something, we're trying to do something real here. Maybe, people hear us out, see what's up.
Bottom of my screen under Chat, Miss Gena.
Hey everybody, my name is Gena Jonas. I had 26 years NYPD retired detective, 4 on patrol, the rest in narcotics, primarily as an undercover. My last 6 years was as a ghost, well, still an undercover. I'm on here, thanks Bill for the invite, first of all, just to give a woman's perspective, because you really don't hear from us too much. And, you just need to hear our side.
Definitely. I have my good brother, Tony. Introduce yourself, please.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Community advocate Tony Herbert. I'm not in law enforcement, but I do support the thought process and what have you, that we've got people on the front lines out here trying to save lives. So we should all be working together.
Thank you. And last but not least, my uncle.
Hi, everybody. Willie Walker. Former chairman of Community Board 10, but recently I just retired. I was appointed by 4 governors to run the Adam Clayton Powell State Office building. I'm also a clergy with NYPD at One Police Plaza.
Yes. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate you all taking the time out your day to talk about such an issue that definitely bothers all of us. And, people have to understand. So first and foremost, you see what's happening with social distancing. And, it seems like in the news now, people of color are getting harassed, if we're going to use that word harassed or whatever words we're going to let you deem is necessary, but being put in situations that we see other nationalities not in. So what I'm going to ask, first and foremost, I'm going to start with you, Gena. Just when you saw the videos, either you saw one of them or both of them, what's your feelings?
I didn't get to watch the videos, Bill.
Okay. You didn't?
So I have to, no.
Okay, well, that's all right. Well, I'm going to come back to you because I want to get into the people that saw the video, but I still want your perspective on police brutality. That's not change. Chet, what was your perspective on the video? How did you feel when you saw it?
Well, as far as I always relay stuff to Gena because she, like I said, she down there in Texas. So, it's in bits and pieces. But the video was crazy. One, because we're dealing with we're dealing with the social situation here. I'm trying to figure out why we're putting so much physicality into this, the situation. Why are we doing this? When I was in transit, it was about, because you on one-man patrol, it was about how you use your mouth, how you related to people, how you talk to people. I can understand. Is that me?
I don't know.
Somebody need to mute their phone.
Somebody got to make their phone while the other person's talking.
When I saw it, I was like, it's too physical for one. One, there was no conversation to a point of relating to the person or the person relating to the officer. Two, the officer's in plain clothes. how am I supposed to relate to you? I don't even, you know, they're not even coming at me with, how would you say, you know, that I can relate to you as who you are. You could be anybody, to be honest. That's how we usually see it. If we don't see that uniform first, you know, we're like, you know, step off, get away. You know, we don't need, you know, who are you? You know, and with the man's, the way he was aggressive, I mean, this is it, man. The mouth is first, man. Relate to people, talk to people. That's how you get by, man. That's the first, what do you call it? You relate to somebody and you can avoid, I'm gonna be honest, I avoided 90% of confrontations. We're talking about one-man patrol in transit back in the day. You know, you by yourself on an A train going 10 minutes on the express and you got a situation. You're gonna talk. And this is how we need to this is how the cats need to relate to the public now. You need to converse before you sit there and put your hands on people. Yeah. It was too physical. It was too straightforward. It was what they call, and on top of that, it was a social situation. It wasn't a gun. It wasn't narcotics. It wasn't rape. It wasn't what. It was a social situation, man. Yeah. I think should have never been brought to that. Never. Yeah. Never.
I'm gonna come back to you. I'm gonna come back to you, Gena. Tony, let me ask you a question. What was your thoughts when you first saw the video?
Well, actually, the crazy part is I started getting texts and inboxes on social media with reference to it. You know, when I got more than 10 of them on one situation, it definitely introduced a scenario that was very much of concern. Mm-hmm. My most personal feelings is that, you know, in reality, you know, again, you know, I mean, I got a little bit of insight on why the police got to some of those locations because of 911 calls and 311 calls. But at the end of the day, it just didn't warrant anybody being snatched up and thrown to the ground and punched in the face because you're not social distancing. That you know, those are the purest civil rights violations that I could see clearly coming from those videos. It was just a bit much, man. And unfortunately, it's a black eye to the police department and whatnot, because all of the great work that they've done over the last couple of years to build community relationships was set back.
Myself. Phil, what was your feelings when you first saw this?
Well, it was disturbing, quite disturbing. And, you know, I think a lot of people look at it as almost like, oh, again, you know, we've gone through this before. And I didn't look at it as the panel just put just social distancing. I looked at it as that the police department, we still haven't learned, and I counted myself as we still haven't learned to define success. What is success and how do we get there? So our success is that, well, we want to make sure we're going to end social distancing. And how we're going to get there, if we're going to get any backtalk from anybody, then this is the reaction that's going to take place. And until we change those objects, it can be social distancing, it could be stop, question, and frisk, it could be a host of different panels. We're going to have that reaction because the police department needs to define what is a successful police department and what's the correct strategy to get there. So you can interchange what the end result is, social distancing, it could be anything at all. Those are the metrics that have to be changed. And I'm confident that with the right people pushing, it certainly can be changed, but very disturbing.
What was your feelings?
My feeling, I saw that, and it reminded me of when they used to talk about young men wilding. They were wilding. They were out of control. And the point is that I think they need to understand what the law is. And what the law is, when there's no law enforcement for social distances, you don't put your hand on anybody. You say, or you ask them to leave, but you don't force them to leave. And everything we've been told and everything that we heard in social distances, there is no law enforcement in this. They were acting like thugs. I saw young women thrown on the ground, handcuffed for no reason. Officer has his knee in a man's head for no reason. I didn't see anything warrant that. First of all, I don't see anything warrant officer acting like that in the first place. They act like thugs, and the video shows that they were really thugs, and they did that intentionally.
Thank you. Gena, I'm going to ask you, being a female, thank you, and the female to this panel. I mean, any other females were more welcome. We can definitely do more of these. Being a mother, being a female officer, first, let me ask you, what did you feel about that if that was your son? And two, how would you have handled that as a female officer? That, you know, there's always ways to have dialogue, like Chet was saying earlier.
Keep it clean, G.
No, it's basic. You can say what you want to say. Go ahead, Gena. Say what you want to say. It's real talk.
No,
Man.
I'm trying to curb my mouth, so I'm gonna try to keep it clean. First off, I mean, I know everybody says this the same thing. It starts at home. So before we could really come at this way, if it was my child, it starts at home. What did I do wrong first? Second is, did I teach them how to interact with the police?
Right.
Because that's something that as parents we have to do. Because, you know, kids feel, this new generation, for some reason, feels that they can say and do whatever they want. The freedom of speech, I get to talk how I want to talk. No, it's about respect. If you give me respect, I give you respect. Right. And that's the way I conducted myself on patrol. Even if they came out wrong the first time, I'd back it up. I'd be like, okay, my name is Detective Jonas. I'm just asking you a question. Can we bring it down a minute?
Right.
You know, de-escalate the situation. But these cops nowadays, they're just,
cowboys.
It just goes above and beyond. It goes above. It's how you talk to them as young men, as young women. They're hitting a point where they have to, they need respect. And we have to show it to them. We're not their parent, you know, and you can't talk down to people and expect them to listen to you. Now, if this was my child, it'd be totally different. Because if they're in the wrong, they're in the wrong. And as parents, you need to come up and if your kid is wrong, correct them, teach them. But the cops have to learn how to deal with kids, how to deal with all ethnicities. Right. You can't just talk down to them and make them feel like they're beneath you and expect them to listen to you. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just not gonna work. That's just how I feel.
You know, I think we all, the ones that definitely went through the academy, and just from a community people standpoint, it's all about, and my uncle was one of the people instrumental in doing sensitivity training, but we all have to understand, speak to somebody like you want to be spoken to.
Yes.
That is a big component that it seems like it's lost. Now, I think people of color think do what white people could do, which they can't. It's just, it is what it is. And I don't say that to be disrespectful to any white friend that we work with. We have some great work with some great white officers, and that's no disrespect, but you know, that's just the realism of this fact. The fact of it is, but it seems like, you know, as we talked about earlier, Phil, that it seems like we can stereotype our own communities and stuff like that. In the sense of people always talking about, you know, fire, reprimand, do this. Phil, can you just give people a breakdown of what would happen, honestly, when somebody gets, as we call it in the police department, jammed up? What are the steps on that?
Well, in a situation like this, they're going to make a determination whether or not this falls under the banner of CCRB, which used to be controlled by the NYPD. Now it's almost a separate entity. And if it falls under the umbrella of CCRB, they're going to conduct an investigation and they're going to send over to the police department a recommendation on a penalty. And then the police commissioner is going to have the final say to determine whether or not he or she, currently he, agrees with that particular penalty. And that penalty will be vetted out. Or oftentimes the penalty is in the time of time. So we'll take a day, we'll take 2, we'll take 3 days, et cetera, et cetera. If it's decided that it's something more severe, then it will go to an Internal Affairs Bureau. They'll do an assessment. They'll either send it down to the local investigations unit or they will conduct the investigation themselves, and then they will come up with their determination, and they'll set the penalty for the police commissioner to vet out. The person accepts the penalty, they accept the penalty. They don't accept the penalty, they go to the trial room, and they'll have their voice heard. On paper, it sounds like a great system, right? There's an outside entity that's doing an investigation. There's an Internal Affairs investigation. But the reality of the matter is that is the punishment, right? Is it designed to correct behavior? And if it's not designed to correct behavior, then what is it designed to do? And I'm going to suggest that it may not be intentional. A lot of the discipline that's coming out does not correct the behavior, right? It causes a more wanted, disgruntled cop. 2, it takes some time from them, which they can easily build back up. And 3, nothing, there's nothing solid, nothing we gain from it. So we need to look at the whole disciplinary process and say, if it's designed to correct behavior, then what are the steps that we need to be able to take? Because we're looking to correct behavior. I never wanted take 5 days or 10 days from a police officer. I wanted him or her to learn and also not do it again. And that's the missing component, I believe, in the disciplinary process that needs to change.
Let me ask you a question from a community standpoint, activist that you are. What did you feel? What would you want to happen to an officer that abuses his power?
Well, I mean, you talking to me or?
I was talking to my uncle. Then I'll go to you, Tony, on that.
Oh, okay.
He evidently he's in a position that he shouldn't have. He has a job, and the job doesn't mean I'm going to beat up whomever I want to beat up, and I'm going to be disrespectful to whomever I want to be disrespectful to. He has a job, and that's not the job that he's doing. I don't think a person like that has gone through the psychiatric training that they should go through. I don't think he understands what law enforcement mean. And it seemed like none of those policemen that was there understood what it means to enforce the law. One started off and everybody decided, I'm going to be the next bully here. I'm going to be as much of a bully as he is, right? I think people like that shouldn't be on the force. And if you're going to separate, if you're going to say, if I'm in a white community, that I'm going to treat people different than I do in the black community, you definitely don't need to be there.
Right.
And what we see is that we don't see in Williamsburg, where you have 1,000 people, where they stop the police cars, nothing happened. And you see 2 young people standing up and get brutalized. They were brutalized. I'm angry. And I'm not going to be nice about it. They shouldn't be on that force. They shouldn't have that job. If anyone else got any jobs other than that, we don't have the protection to say, well, you beat up somebody, so I'm going to take a day. Like Phil said, this is what happened. I'm going to take a day. You don't need to be there. If you can't conduct yourself properly, do the things that should be done, the job that you have, it's not the job for you.
Right. Tony, what's your thoughts?
Well, one, it hurts. I mean, quite frankly, here it is. It's looking like a modern day form of stop and frisk. Authorized by this mayor, who clearly made a point to turn around and say, we're not gonna tolerate any craziness. You're gonna get summoned to whatever the case may be. But that same exact energy wasn't espoused in Williamsburg. And with regards to what they had done, which I don't recall anybody being arrested or anybody being manhandled, then to turn around and apologize because supposedly the Jewish community felt some kind of way that he singled them out. When in reality, he said, they were the object of the concern, and he also said all other communities. But then to turn around and allow for or give the indication and what have you that this is some form of a Giuliani time kind of thing, we can't have that. If you can't be sensitive to respecting the civil rights of people in our community, you damn sure don't need this job. That's just the bottom line. But as far as, the concerns of the people is this, what have you. Yes, we need people to police our community, but we don't need people to come in and enforce in the violation of our civil rights if the fact that you're not going to do your job accordingly. So, and I get hit with this all the time because my position has always been, I wait for all the details to come in, and then I make a determination on what avenue of advocacy I should take so that I understand the dynamics of what's happening. Now, I'm going to sit here and say, there was faults on both sides, but the abuse was done by those police officers who got the impression that de Blasio said, go in there and manhandle those people and do what you want. That's where the sight of law enforcement changed from being people who are there to protect us to people who wants to hurt us.
Thank you. Anybody want to comment on that, or everybody's good?
Did you see Central Park where police officers was giving out masks? They were very civil. And you had people together, 4 or 5 people together, sitting down, sunbathing. They came and gave them masks, very civil, talked to them, totally different from a black community.
Yeah.
And that's what needs to change. How do you deal with people like me? How do you, and I'm not a thug, but I will be treated like one simply because of my color.
Right.
And we have minority officers doing this as well.
Yeah.
And I just want to
go ahead, Phil. Go ahead, Phil.
Just kind of to what Tony said. I think, Tony, you're right on point. Oftentimes, that we focus on that individual element, that individual police officer who engages in that act, And that's one of the things that I would just suggest that as a community, as a panel, as a people, that we start to just reevaluate that. And what I mean by that is that it's akin to, you know, you feeding your kid a whole bunch of sugar, and he or she goes to school and they start acting up, and now all of a sudden now we want to discipline the child. When the reality of the matter, the root cause of it is in fact that the sugar that the parents are loading up on. These
Right.
jobs, you're never going to change that situation. But what you can change is the brass, the ones who's responsible, to supervise the leadership. And I'm talking about going completely up the ladder to the chief of the department, to the police commissioner. It's incumbent on them to put these systems in place to vet out these things. If we put the pressure on them, then those problems will eliminate themselves. If we try to make every single police officer the issue, there's 35,000 police officers, right? And we can be chasing our tail. But if you put the onus on these individuals, it's quite simple. If you had a situation that took place in Williamsburg or took place in Crown Heights, that commander and possibly that borough commander, which has happened, borough commanders were removed because of individual actions that took place. That community wasn't focused on an individual officer. That was inconsequential. You had borough commanders and precinct commanders officers that was removed because, quote unquote, this happened under your watch. It was unacceptable. And that's the level we need to take it to. So I just want to applaud, you know, Tony Herbert, when you said, I mean, you're bringing up to the mayor, and that's where we need to look, the mayor, police commissioner, chief department, chief patrols. You know, I'm not singling anybody out because no matter who you put there, it's a process. But we need to focus on why are you allowing this to happen, or what are you doing to stop it from happening, not what are you doing after it happened to discipline somebody, because they're going to take 5 days from this individual and they're going to, and the mayor's going to trump it. But the question becomes, what did you put in place to stop something like this from happening in the beginning? And as a community, we need to be fair. If their process is designed to do the right thing, and there's mistakes that happen from time to time, we have to be an understanding community as we are. But I would challenge that the system overall, the problem is the brass, it's the mayor's office that creates a system that allows this to happen. It's not the individual police officers. They're just as much as the victim as the communities that they serve.
Very much so.
So, Bill,
Go ahead, Tony. Sure, go ahead.
Just to bring some clarity, I was briefed a little bit on what took place, particularly like in Brownsville. You know, I spoke with folks on the ground, and I spoke with law enforcement who also gave me some of the details. So this is the picture, the scenario that was painted, that apparently there was a young person who had suffered from COVID, you know, what have you, had just got out, you know, just got better. So they were gathering around to celebrate the fact that his health was better, you know, and as that was taking place, something like 300 people came together. That's a closely, you know, knit kind of community, Marcus Garvey houses. I mean, they all live right there on top of each other. So if anything's going down, here's an opportunity the weather's nice, let's get outside. Making no excuses, you know, what have you. What was happening was 2 individuals got into something, and 911 and 311 calls were made. That's how the police arrived on the scene. But when they got there, the 2 individuals involved in the scuffle had been long gone. But what they walked on was, you know, a bunch of folks who got tired of being locked down, who got outside and got some air. And now here it is, people are yelling at them, get in the house, separate, ba, 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 ba. It agitated the atmosphere. And that's why it turned out what it was, because now it got confrontational. So naturally, one of the big cops got into it with this other big guy, and naturally the flow of stupidity just went from there, and it all went downhill. So those small, meticulous little situations, when we call the police, it turns into those scenarios because some people come with the wrong attitude. And you can't go into a situation, and then I don't think that, you know, that there was any training to get people to understand the psyche of individuals who had been locked down for almost 2 months. That now they're getting this freedom, they were like animals in a cage, locked in, trying to get out, wanting to be able to get some fresh air. I don't think that there was any sensitivity to that. And that has to be expressed to these police officers when they come in the community.
You know, let me interject for a second and say that I think when we talk about understanding, and Chet, I want you to comment on this, and I'll open it up to anybody that wants to comment on this. But I want to Chet and then Gena. When we talk about how sensitivity, I think a lot of people forget that we are human beings. I think anybody that's done this job, I think we've all got hooked at one point or another. That's why I'm talking about the 4 officers that are here. that people have hooked us and been like, oh, we look at this point that some people have lost their minds who you think you're talking to. You know, I think we all can agree that the way we used to work years ago would not go for today. I mean, that's just facts. You know, it is what it is. Because the bottom line is we've never been in a situation where this job has always taught us to be authoritative. And then all of a sudden when people started getting jammed up, and then as that word, it became CPR, community police respect. Now, I've always deemed myself a police officer, not a cop, you know, because a cop I thought was always a derogatory word. But so I took pride in working in Harlem. I'm from Harlem, so that's why I wanted to work with Harlem, because I felt like who better to relate to people in my community. So Chet, I'm gonna start with you on this. Give me some insight on if you want a Monday morning quarterback, because I hate when cops say, oh, you can't Monday morning quarterback a situation. People get paid in the NFL the Monday morning quarterback situation. So I could get paid to do this shit too from the sideline. You know what I'm saying? So I want Chet and Gena, I want you, Chet, you first. Give me your insight on how you think you would have handled that situation or de-escalated that whole incident, if you can. And we've all done narcotics, and we all work patrol, so go ahead, please.
Today?
Exactly.
Today is a whole different story than what it would have been a few years, right, Jay? Because she could testify because we were partners.
Right.
I ain't gonna lie. Hey, listen, I lost my mind on a couple of times, but it never, because you always look back on what you have to lose. You have to lose, one, your respect of who's surrounding you, the community, and I don't know, man, even your fellow partners and cops, man, to be honest, those who are straight with you. Have I done this? No. Should have been done? First of all, my man walked over to him. My man had made a concerted effort to walk over to him.
20 feet.
Yeah.
Dude, to what? Listen, I could do the dozens from 20 feet. I can go back at you if that's the case, if that's what gets me off, if that's what's going to solve me and calm me down. But I don't, come on. No, dude, it's the back and forth's been done. Have I arrested? I've arrested people for the obstruction charge. You know, you've done the deal.
The discount, exactly.
Yeah, you've done the deal. You know, but to sit here and go to that person and to escalate something that need not been, you already had your collar right there. You work on that one. Now you got to sit here and articulate this one, and it's on camera. Are you kidding me? There's no what do you call it? I would have handled it different. Like I said, I got a good thing with my mouth. I can pretty much get out of anything. G is better than I am, so you know we still walking. So articulation is better, dude.
Gena, how do you think you would have handled that?
In this day and age, it would have been totally different. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I've been hooked, and sometimes you have to reel yourself back in. You know, I catch myself and you're going back and forth, and you're like, where am I going with this? How am I going to have them respect me when, one, I'm not respecting them, two, I'm not respecting my uniform or myself?
Right.
You know, so you have to pull it back sometimes, and I've apologized. I mean, it's not easy. You know, you're like, you know, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have spoke to you like that. Can we start this over? And it's not the easiest thing to do, but sometimes you have to in order to rectify. And, you know, what you will get the community behind you. You know, I've had a cat come up to me and be like, this officer arrested me, she's good. And I'm like, what the, really?
Right.
But it's the way that we treat them, the way that we talk to them, you know, that gets the respect, and the community will be behind you. They know we're human. They know we make mistakes, but you have to be able to say, I made a mistake. I am so sorry. Can we start this conversation over? You know, one, even in narcotics, but you know, we walked up on people, and if I snatch you up and you swing and hit me the first time, you know what? You got that one because you don't know who I am.
Right.
Now you're not gonna get the next one once I say who I am.
Exactly.
But that first one, okay, oops. Now you know who I am. Can we stop this?
Now we we stop.
This is what these young cops need to realize. There's nothing wrong with swallowing your pride a little bit to learn to deal with the community. In order to get them to do what you need them to do, sometimes you gotta feed them a little sugar. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to come out all abrupt because you have a uniform and you think you're better than everybody else, because we're not. We're there to do a job. We're not better than. We're just doing a job. And you have to learn how to do the job.
Tell me about the counseling, Jay. Tell me how many times we counsel these cats, man. We're talking about corner boys and all of this other stuff. Done, whatever the case is. We get them in a cell when we finally have to arrest them. Yo, my man, It's necessary. Why are we doing this?
And, you know, I'm gonna open it up to everybody, but I'm gonna say this from being a prior law enforcement too. I think there was a thing with, you know, like if I could snap, you know, like if you went to the dozens with me on the corner and call me out my name, I could be like, oh, look at you, you on the corner. If I want to play that game, but the bottom line is, it was a level of respect and how I got respect or how you get respect. I think everybody here has never, you know, I'm sure in law enforcement aspect, has never put their hands on anybody that didn't deserve it. I think we have a problem with people putting their hands and being excessive when they don't need to be. And I mean, I see a lot of white officers that are in here, and I implore you to all, if anytime you want to come on this show, please just let me know, because the bottom line is nobody's sitting here saying that it's just about white officers. We're just talking about police being excessive in a new world order that you can't be. You know, Phil, they always said about certain lives training, and I'll let you piggyback off this, but is there any really training for a person that has a mentality that doesn't really care about the community that he serves?
Yeah, it's called termination. It's the best training out there. It's called termination. I know we discussed this earlier, but I just, and the comment that you just made, Bill, I've got to say this, and I don't know if this is it's a good comment or a bad comment. It's a comment that I've looked at, studied, and in my observation, I have not seen the white officer any worse than the black officer. Some of the worst officers I've ever seen have been black, right?
Yes.
Some of the best I've seen have been white and black, right? So it's really not a racial issue, which breaks down to, I mean, it is, because society is racist and it's a racist institution, but
yes.
it's not like the police officers out there and saying that I'm going to now on this search and destroy mission because I'm seeing these darkies that I just don't have any respect for. It's the culture that promotes that type of environment. It's not the individual officers. I've come across my desk with officers where brothers who look and who treated people who could have been their grandmother, their mother, their sister, and just shaking my head. And I've seen others who are from way out of Long Island had the most caring that I've seen. So that's the issue that we really need to, I mean, it brings a lot of headlines, it brings a lot of media attention. I've also seen officers that's come on a job that I've known personally, that the job has transformed them into something that they weren't. So when Gena just made that comment about how she can dial it back, you know, I don't want to speak for her, but I would imagine that's something that she was not taught. That was something, I mean, she might have been taught by her family. She wasn't taught that with the job. That was something that they had within them.
Yes.
But for the ones who don't have it in them, how do we correct those situations? And it comes in all types of colors. And that's the culture breakdown that we need to have. And it really comes down to this. And I always said this, that there was a story, and you may not be baseball fans, but years ago, there was this a great shortstop named Ozzie Smith.
Ozzie from St. Louis Cardinals, brother.
St. Louis Cardinals.
Yeah.
And he was looking for this $1 million contract. And the owner said to the manager, how can I give this guy $1 million contract?
He only got one home run.
The manager said, well, you gave it to Jack Clark. And he says, well, Jack Clark bats in 100 RBIs a year. And he said, Ozzie Smith saves you 100 RBIs a year.
Yes.
And he always says that he could never, it took that to say, wow, 100 RBIs, 100 RBIs. We have in policing the culture where walking away and smiling, that's not value. That's not trained. That's not treasured. It's when somebody says something, take control. That might have worked in the 60s, and we can argue whether it was that effective now. But there's a whole different way of policing, because I would challenge those officers who allow themselves to be goaded. That's an opportunity for you could take that particular individual, and he could be the best. I don't want to call him an informant, like, because he's ratting on anybody, but he could be letting you know what's in the community. That's the element that we have to bring up, that you're going to get somebody who's saying, F you, officer. How many of those can you turn around and 10 minutes later have them to be your friend? And if you value, treasure, and promote it off of those things, then you'd have officers following that. But the system is not designed to do that. And that's what we need to be able to look to correct to a degree, in my opinion.
Of course. Uncle, let me ask you a question. Dealing with sensitivity training, dealing with white, black, Latinos, just what's your mental on just the conduct becoming of an officer and how he should act in communities of color or not color?
Well, I used to do sensitivity training for the 2.6, 2.8, and the 3.2. And they had to come, new officers came into Harlem, came into my office, and I sit and I talk with them. I had staff that would walk them around 125th Street and talk about what their attitude should be in this community, what this community is made up of. And we talk to them constantly about it. I would go for roll call and I would talk to them about this. So my staff and the people that I knew, we were community people that made sure that the officers paid attention to what happened in Harlem. So we didn't see a lot of the things that in Harlem that you see outside of Harlem.
Right.
We also talked to the young people about saying, I know the law, and they don't. First of all, we talk to them about following command. What is a command? When a person gives you command, follow that command before you do anything. It's like driving. You know, a cop come up and he stopped you and he said, you know, license registration. You want to know, what did I do? You know, you could ask that, but give him what he asked for first, right? That diffuses a lot of things that you ordinarily see with police officers. You know, I'm coming with authority. I have authority. I don't need to answer you. And we see a lot of that. But we need to understand from the community as well as training the police officers, right? How do the community, listen, if a police officer stopped me, before I identify myself, I'm going to follow the command that he gives me. You want my license? Fine. You want me to identify myself? Fine. I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to ask him some questions. But I follow the command first to diffuse, even if he's angry. It diffuses that. So I think on both sides, police officers need to know what their job is and what they're responsible for, but the community need to know how to communicate with those officers that may be hot-headed, may be angry, may just want to get in your case. You diffuse that by the way that you act. Questions that you answer, right? And follow commands. Follow commands first, and all this other stuff you could do after that.
And that's what we're talking about, accountability. I'm just going to read some comments from people that are saying that here. Sophia, she said, oh, I lost that post. I'm going to read what Jerome said. He said, hello, everyone. Great to see the discussion, but Brother Bill, personal opinion, we can talk about this with distinguished panel. Oh, I'm going to have to go back because it's moving. Let me say some people in here just chiming left and right. So with that being said, somebody asked a question, and I'll start with you, Tony, and then I'll work my way to Gena and Chet. Somebody said, what do you think about the PBA? You know, basically I'm paraphrasing this right now because I'm trying to stop it from going around. Do you think they take a softer approach, harder approach? I mean, what do you think about the PBA, Tony?
This is purely my opinion. And, you know, I've had the opportunity to sit down and, you know, I've talked to several of the police unions in the past when I ran for office looking for endorsements. You got to understand something. The PBA don't answer to the people of the city of New York. The PBA answers directly for the police officers who actually vote them in and pay their salary. So Pat Lynch can give a flying kitty cat about anybody that ain't an officer at this point, because he's going to do what's necessary to rally around his troops to make sure that his job stays intact. And that's just kind of the attitude. So we can ask for him to be removed and all that other stuff. It ain't happening unless the police officers who are members of that union decide to remove it.
Right. Okay. Gena?
I agree. The PBA is there to protect the cops. It's not there to help the community or to be the bridge between the community and the police officer. You know, that they're there to protect. When we were cops, they were there to protect the police officer, just like the DEA protects the detectives. They're not going to solve anything. Like you said, they're voted in, they get a salary, they're going to do what they do to maintain that salary.
Yeah.
So it has nothing to do with them. It has to come from somebody else to correct this. They're not going to correct anything. Because if they try to correct it, they're going to get voted out, and nobody wants to lose money.
Right.
So it has to come from somebody else in order to correct this.
Yeah. So, you know, Chet, let me ask you a question. Talk about the mentality of a police officer, and just like you said, I mean, the PBA or any of the unions, they're there to protect us. It's almost like necessary evil. They say what they want to say. I think personally, it's great that they back us, but I think they should be a little bit more tactful in how they address the situation. You know, I think you can get the person to do almost sometimes anything you want to, but it's how you tell to them. You know what I'm saying, everybody? If I tell you go fucking do that, you'd be like, yo, who you talking to? If I say, yo, can you please go over there and get that for me? It's a whole different mentality. But I think when we start delving into, because it's one thing, and don't get me wrong, I wore the blue, I got down with the blue, but I'm black first, and I tell anybody that. And that's no disrespect to my white officers, my friends, and stuff like that. So please don't ever take anything personal. But when they always say, well, Bill, you were a police officer, but wait a minute, I was black first. I became a police officer. Like that was only from a 9 to 5 or a 20-year stretch. That's not who I am every day of my life. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not putting up, you know, this and that, all this blue, all that. That's not who I am. I'm so much different than that. But I just want to ask you, Chet, like, what's your mentality of when it's just so rah-rah cop?
I don't know, brother. You know, my pops was a cop. You know, he was a cop. Let me get some shit. I love being a police officer.
Right.
I love being a detective. I love working in narcotics. I like the run and gun. I'm not going to lie to you. It is, and to sit here and for anybody to come on and chime in and say, well, you know, it was a job. Yeah, it was a job, but I loved it, man.
Right,
you know, I had a good role model. My pops was a cop. I had friends who were cops. My best friend worked in Brooklyn narcotics.
Right.
So it was good role models to be around. The rah-rah, the PBA, like G said, like Tony, especially G, if I get jammed up, I want these dudes behind me.
Right.
I want that nonsense. I want that crap. I want that whatever the case is to get me off, especially if I was raw.
Right.
You know, I want that nonsense. But to get yourself in that position should be avoided. You shouldn't have all of that to sit here and have my man from the PBA who sits there and will see a cop whip your behind on the street and go, well, what did the guy do? You know, the justification is you should never have said anything from 20 feet. You know, I want that backing. I paid for that backing. But to sit here and have that backing, how would you say, misrepresented? You know, I don't want to be misrepresented as, okay, I get off every time I do some nonsense. Because if you look at my man's thing, not to single him out, but he is the topic. The dude has got like 5 or 6 issues, man, that he's been sued.
One of them myself.
The dude.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
He did this on St. Nicholas Avenue, and I called Secreto once he did it to a black guy. Same identical thing came up in confrontational. Same thing, the same guy.
This is why, you know, you want respect. I can understand some of these cats. You know, you're 5'2", you're $140. You're gonna have a little rah-rah with you, or you're gonna get handed to you. But when you constantly do this, and this dude is averaging a lawsuit a year.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you going for? What is there?
He's averaging a lawsuit.
Like Phil said, the brass is not doing their job when this happens.
I think there might be a certain amount of money that you have to give up before you start getting sidelined, because he hasn't met that goal yet. But as far as the PBA and the DEA and the SBA, you want these cats behind you when you do something or get jammed up. But if you're looking at it from our perspective now, we retired, because I look at things a little differently now. I was rah-rah cop, this and that. Now I'm looking at them like, whoa, wait a minute. My sons have been stopped. I've been stopped. G's been stopped. You've been stopped. We all been stopped. And look at him like, wait, whoa. Dude, would you have done that to me if I had gold, if you saw it? You know? I mean,
well, I've always told people that my ID is the leave me alone pass. You know what I'm saying? It's the one thing that you say, well, listen, I ain't black. I'm a cop black, but I'm black. You know what I'm saying? And it is what it is. I mean, we are stereotyped. We are profiled. Don't dare think. Let me tell you something. How many times have we heard, yo, there's guys on the corner. Go see if they working. These kids basketball. Like, yeah, come on, man, knock it off. You know what I'm saying? But I want to go to you, Phil. Let me ask you a question. Let's delve into the psychological aspect of this whole cops, sensitivity. Like, how do we wean out the bad cops with the good cops? You said something earlier on Tony's show about, you know, we can profile a criminal, but we don't profile our own. and not the fact that we're profiling them in a negative light, but wait a minute, if you keep coming up, CCRBs, getting lawsuits, stuff like that, excessive force. Dove back into that you was discussing earlier, if you don't mind, please.
You know, it's just that, law enforcement, look, this officer here that has these lawsuits, right? If you ask the entity, and the entity now just happens to be Dermot Shea, how many times has he been tested by undercover cops? So because they said they're defending, every time he gets a lawsuit, they're selling, right? It doesn't come out of the budget. It doesn't affect the bottom line. So the city pays out the money, right? But it's not coming out of the police department budget, so they're not buying less cars, they're not buying less equipment. So there's no real effect of it, right? So they're defending his actions, and maybe some of those lawsuits, his actions needed to be defended, right? Just because you were subject of a lawsuit, part of the problem is that doesn't mean that officer did anything wrong in those lawsuits. I don't know if those 7 are. But if you have a certain amount, you're supposed to do a certain amount of checks and balance so that you can see for yourself, is this officer now conducting himself in a manner that is outside the perimeter of his job? You see, because what happens is that he says, I didn't do it, right? The sergeant said he didn't do it. The partner said he didn't do it. So you have one particular person who's alleging he did it, who might have 2 or 3 arrests. And this is what we do to divide a car, could be demonized. And all of a sudden, we say, well, we'll pay out. But what you're supposed to do when you trick those algorithms is you're supposed to have a test set up where police officers tested him. Now we have conclusive proof, or we don't, that this particular officer now, in fact, is not performing his job, and now here's appropriate action. Not because we have heard somebody making a complaint, because we have it on videotape or we have it on our own self. That is not what we do, and that's something that there's a structure. Getting back to something that Gena said, because I thought she brought up a really good point about the PBA and about the unions in general. These unions don't know how to make these comments where they want to unify the police officers in the community. They don't know how. If they were taught and shown how, they absolutely would. Pat Lynch is not this monster that sits back and saying, I don't care. I mean, he has to support his council knowing he's a union president. We're giving the brass and we're giving the union too much credit. They don't see the side that you've lived and experienced. They don't know it. They're not disregarding it. They don't know it. And if we could develop a mechanism where we could teach them that, you can make a lot more progress. Pat Lynch's membership is better off with a great relationship with the community, all communities. He's doing his members a service if he promotes that. He does not know how to do it. And if he's taught how to do it, Pat used to work for me when he was a police officer in community affairs, and I was lieutenant on precinct. Right. If he was shown that process, I'm relatively confident that it would open up, and he would say, wow, this is a new beginning because it works for my cops, and it just happens to work for the community. And those are some of the steps that we need to start looking for. How do we come up with concrete solutions, right, rather than just identifying the problems over and over again?
Okay, Phil, let me ask you a question. You got an individual like Willie Walker, and you got Tony Herbert, big, very activist people, community oriented, and they come to you after they see something like this, and Willie's like, I want to know what happens, right? What's going to happen to this officer? I want him fired, I want charges, whatever. How do you articulate to him that that's not the process, or is the process? What are you saying?
Repeat that again, because I'm not sure I grasped it.
So what I'm trying to just say, how do you articulate to the community, somebody like a Tony or a Willie that are politically conscious and or very active in the community? And a lot of times I think people misconstrue that when they see an officer get into altercation or get jammed up, as we say, police jargon, that they talk about pressing charges or get them fired and things like that. Do you explain to them, because you have relations with the community, you had a good relationship when you were working, you still do. How do you articulate to the community, that the people that are listening that are not law enforcement, the process of what happens with the law enforcement? You said it earlier, but how do you diffuse that? I just want him fired, because that's not going to happen right away.
Right, that's not going to happen, right? And that's the emotional response. And the problem is that as a community, we wait till those flashpoint situations happen, and all of a sudden we want to deal with that situation rather than dealing with the overall process. I want to be clear about this. I didn't think it was many people that was as tough from a disciplinary point on cops as I was.
Right.
But I don't think there were many people that was as supportive as I was as well. So you can support and say rah rah, or you can support behind closed doors. It all depends on what gratification that you need. So I'm a firm believer that if the officer did his job, or she did their job, they need the support from the community as well as from the department. But when they cross that line, then we need to make sure that the system is fair. What happens so many times when I was in a position in explaining it, the process is flawed. I'm explaining what's the existing process, but it's a flawed process. So when people hear it, they're hearing consistently. There's no way that you can articulate how you have pictures of police officers handing out masks on a beach.
Right.
And now we got somebody down on the corner. And it's not the police officer's fault. We got to go much higher than that, because what the brass doesn't understand is that that corner is that person's beach. That corner is that person's Central Park. Right. They don't have a backyard. They can't walk to the best park in the world, which is 2 blocks away. They can't have access to the beach. So their corners become the beach. And that's something that the brass have to understand. They sent out to those beaches masks. They didn't send it out to the people there. Not because I don't care about this community, it's because they can't even process the difference between the two. But, and I'm gonna take a shot at Chet, Gena, and you, Bill, right, and myself, because we are law enforcement. We've seen that. We've been in both shoes. It's incumbent upon us to organize and now force the police department to listen to us. And we can tell them, I can be black or blue, but it doesn't make a difference to you. But on both sides of the equation, this works for both sides. There's no way Dermot Shea, Terry Monahan, Rodney Harrison, any of them says, don't give out masks to people on the corner, they give it out to the beach. What they don't understand is the beach is those people's corner. And once you're made to understand that, now it's a whole different process that comes on. And once we finalize something like that, then it's easier to identify the officers who do step out of line. But what happens, once again, you have to define success for an agency. And that's part of the problem that we have not been able to.
I'm gonna let you comment right now on what Phil just said. But we looked at the other altercation, and the cop pulled out his ass when he told the guy, he said, "Go home." So the guy said, he said, "Do you live here?" The guy said, "I live here." He said, "Well, go home." So it's like, damn, like you said, Phil, yeah, this is his beach, but now you're telling me I can't even stand on my beach, and I'm giving you 6 feet, but you feel like I'm threatening you because I'm standing there watching you. Am I threatening you, watching you because you're doing something wrong? Because, you know, we can go back to the, you know, in Black Panther Party, they told us that, yo, I could start watch you from a certain distance. But comment on what you felt, what you heard Phil say. Is that what you would agree with? It? Would you accept? You don't care? You want some answers? You want some heads to roll? What do you feel?
No, and I understand, and Phil is absolutely right. You know, the point is that with sensitivity training, people don't know. Like Phil said, you know, my beach is on the corner here. This is where I hang out. This is where my friends are. This is where we drink beer, if we drink beer, whatever, right? So are you conscious to in understanding where I am with my socialization are different from being on a beach? Yes. My socialization is right here. And police officers need to understand that. And that's part of training. That's part of sensitivity training, is to sensitize people to things that they don't know, or things that they don't want to learn, they should learn, because this is your job. When this young man stood on his stoop, he said, "Do you live here?" He said, "Yes, I live here." That should have been the end of it. He walked up to him and said, "Go in the house." You can't tell. Now, when you do that, you are going far beyond what your ability is to police. You can't
Willie, even if he didn't live there, he still had the right to be there.
Right.
He didn't have to live there. That's one of the things that we do in law enforcement. No, I don't live here, but I'm here. Right. There's nothing illegal about me being here. So that's the process there. So I just wanted to just.
And he asked the question though. He asked the question. He said, "Do you live here?" The young man said, "Yes, I live here." He said, "Then go in the house." His authority stopped at that. I live here. And he didn't let his authority stop there. He told him, "Go in the house," and then approached him. The other young man that's standing there, he approached him and said, "You go in the house too." That's above his authority to do that. So what you're saying is that he's not being sensitive to this young man socializing and being where he need to be at the time that he was there.
Yeah, Tony, what do you think? If you on that sensitivity training or just sensitivity with within people working in our community, you can say black, white, anything, because we all know as officers, there's a certain mentality when you go out there and work. You know, you ain't gonna let nobody disrespect you. I mean, especially from the era that I've worked with these officers, and I'm sure Phil, we were all officers at the same time, even though he was a supervisor at the time, but he was an officer. But so what I'm saying, there's a certain mentality that is taught, and I think all of us kind of got it. And there's and no disrespect to any of the white officers, the Latin officers that are out there watching, and I ask you all, if you want to come on and talk, let's chop it up, because you know this is a platform that people can hear what you feel and say also, and hopefully they don't judge you for what you're saying. You know what I'm saying? But Tony, like, tell me what you think about officers and not having sensitivity for people in their community, or what should they do? How can we get them sensitivity? You know what I'm saying?
Well, it always starts at the top. If you're not given the proper training to individuals to work in a community where the taxes are being paid by the very people you're supposed to protect, then you don't need to be working in that community. The thought process again is that, there has to be some level of sensitivity. And we talked about it in the beginning. When you're talking about folks who have been locked down because of a pandemic and told to stay in your house so that you don't get sick, and an opportunity presents themselves for them to be able to come out and get some fresh air on a nice, warm, sunny day or whatever it might be, they'll only have somebody come back and disrespect them or degradate them or talk or to a sense of belittling them. That sends off a whole sense of rage that now this person's not even hearing you anymore. Now it's confrontational. And that's what we don't need. And the problem, I think, for the most part, is I don't think that any of those anti-crime officers down in the village should have ever jumped out that car. I think it should have been left to community affairs or the NCOs to come in and deal with the issue, quite frankly. Yes, I heard that they said that they saw some marijuana be passed or whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day and what have you, the way things were handled, it set the wrong tone. And that tone is being created by this mayor. And he has the sole responsibility because he was the one that went in the media and he clearly said, we're not tolerating anything. That right there is a message and a half telling the officers, you've got the back of the mayor because he's telling you to go out there and do your job. Now that mayor's going to bust a hump on those COs or those commanding officers or whatever the case may be to do their job. And I think Phil even said it. Oftentimes people get transferred from their jobs from the top up. So at the end of the day, who's giving the message and who is delivering the message when they leave the precinct or they leave the precinct house to go to do their job? Who's preparing them to let them know this is what's going on? So this is what we need you to do. And I believe, and honestly, and I don't care what anybody says. I stand guard for a lot of police officers like yourself, Bill, like Phil Banks and others and what have you. I have a relationship that are friends. I have family that are in the police department. I'm not going to stand up here and do no rah-rah, fight the power, let's go beat up on the police. I'm never going to do that because the likelihood of you attacking somebody that I love is great when you talk that kind of stupidity. But I will say this, that at the end of the day and what have you, these politicians are the ones that we should have the problem with. They're the individuals and what have you that's sending the wrong messages out there. They're not standing strong for the community. They're selling the community out. And it creates that atmosphere that leads the police department to go clean up their mess. That's the issue I'm dealing with. And at the end of the day, people are confused because they don't know who to trust. And when it's all said and done, it's the politicians, this mayor, and all these individuals who've got their hands in the pockets of the communities that take care of them that's causing them to shit on us in the black and brown community.
Respect. Anybody want to chime in on that before I go to the next?
Yeah, Bill,
Sure.
my perspective is you can't serve a community if you don't understand a community.
Right.
So all of the sensitivity training, we went through training in the academy. You couldn't even keep your eyes open. I'm not even gonna lie. Half the time I didn't know what the man was talking about and I could care less. I just wanted, what time are we getting out of here? What time is lunch, you know?
Remember verbal judo, right?
Yeah. So
More data.
It can't be in the class. It can't be in the class. They have to get out and actually learn the community that they're serving. I don't know how to propose this or how to do it, but they have to become one with their community. They have to understand, if I live on a 32nd floor in a 3-bedroom apartment with 8 people, But you have a big backyard, a pool, and all it is. I come outside. I don't want to go back inside, like you said, with this pandemic. I'm allowed to come outside now. I've been stuck in this apartment with all these people that I might not like, or it's too stuffy. Like, there's no yard for to play with. The kids are running all over the place. So we get to come outside, and now you're just shoving us back inside. You can't understand that because you have this big yard, or you have this, or you never grew up like that. We have to find a way for these cops to acclimate themselves with the people that they're serving. And that's the only way it's going to work. In a classroom, it's not going to work. It's not going to do it. You can preach to the choir, and it's not going to sing right. You know, so they have to come up with a way. I don't know if it's you know, when you get assigned to a precinct, if you spend time there, plain clothes, not a cop, go through the community, see what the community is about, see how people are living, talk to people, get an understanding of people. But a classroom setting, I don't think it's going to work. I don't know how else to do it.
What do you think, Chet?
On point. It's not. You got to get out there. You got to deal. Like she said, man, you're falling asleep in the thing, man. Because if it's not interesting to us, how are we going to relay it to anybody else? If we're not going to pay attention to what we're being taught or shown, or this is how we're going to do it this quarter, then how are we going to relate it to anybody else, man? You know, as simple as that. We can't relay something that we're not interested in ourselves, you know?
You know, I always say, I tell people all the time, I've worked with some wonderful white officers. I work with some wonderful Latin officers. I work with some terrible black officers, and I work with some great officers of all nationalities. What I don't like sometimes when you have officers that have a certain mentality. And when that mentality, let me say something, people talk about, yeah, they swore oath, but your personal beliefs will always supersede that oath. And what I mean, I'm not talking about jamming somebody up or planting any drug. I'm talking about how you just interact. You know what I'm saying? My uncle will tell you, we got pulled over one day, officer just comes out, I go first, I make the traffic infraction. Another car takes the traffic infraction after me. Supersedes it was a white driver, and I'm calling a spade, it is what it is. It was a white driver, my uncle and I, we go first. White car comes, the white individual comes behind us. He lets him go, pulls us over. We identify ourselves. What does he say? He says, damn, I should have went after the other car.
No, that's not what happened. When you identified yourself, you apologized.
Yes.
You said, why didn't you go after the other guy then?
Yes, exactly.
And he said, yes, I should have went after him.
Exactly. So I'm saying all that to say that I feel personally that there is a mentality. You know, I always say this when people talk about, you know, living outside, living in New York State, but not living in the 5 boroughs. I personally feel, I think if you know, in the point of evolution of upgrading yourself, I think you can move eventually to where you want to. But I always said, I think an officer should be an inner city child, you know, 5 years, you know, live within the community, you know, in the 5 boroughs, not to New York State. And then if you want to move out, because nobody should say you should not evolve, because I think you care more when you come out of that building or you come out of that thing and you see that garbage on the floor, or you see people hanging in front of things. We've always been taught not to get involved off duty. But then years ago, a cop kind of could do whatever he wanted to do. I'm saying all this to say that I think training, and then I'll go to you, Phil, again, and Tony, and and you know, the whole panel. I just think training is short-lived. I mean, what's the solution? What do you honestly feel about how can we get an officer to not act like that, not to have that mentality?
I think,
Go ahead, Tony. Go, please.
I think the first thing that has to be done, we have to get back to the process of going to the precinct houses and talking with them at roll call. And also when they come out of the academy and having the ability to talk with them so they can understand. I participated with Dr. Richard Green and a couple of folks where we actually went, like the Brooklyn North cops was coming out. We all went to CCC and had the ability to talk to about 30, 40 cops that were being assigned to the different precincts in Brooklyn North. And the whole premise of the conversation was so that they can identify with the fact of who we are in the community and what we do as people. and whatnot. You have a job to do, but we have a job as people to be citizens, good citizens, but at the same time, we have to be respected. And that message has to keep resonating so that these officers understand you may have a gun and a shield, but that's only authorizing you to do what you came here to do by oath, not come in here and abuse or take away somebody's civil right because you feel you have the power to do that. That message has to keep resonating. And I think what happens is, and I got to say this about the police department, and I've learned this, and this is with the exception of Phil, because Phil actually invited me to One Police Plaza. He sent a car to come get me, to sit down with him in his office to have the conversation, because I think at the time I was the most boisterous about gun violence at the time. And with that being said, that's the kind of stuff that we have to do. You got to know who to talk to in the community. There are a lot of people that are standing up here, what have you, that are rabble-rousers. They get off on this stupidity, and they love to keep the tension going. And we as a community get treated as the scapegoats in the middle, and we're the ones getting disrespected. We're the ones getting hurt. We're the ones getting harmed because there's a lack of responsibility from real leadership to step up and say that we want to lead in the right direction, but we want to do this without antagonizing. We want to do this without creating an atmosphere where we can't work together. I've sat in meetings with elected officials whose premise was to go to the meeting to disrupt it with the police. They didn't want to have dialogue. They wanted to run outside and get in front of the cameras and talk about how they denounced the police department. They denounced community leaders who had a voice because they want to be superficial. People that look like us. Right. So there's a lot of stupidity going on in our society, and our folks are being misled because what our folks want, and as a black person in my community who's raising 3 black boys by my, by the hairs that I'm losing on my head and whatnot, I gotta say, I'm quite concerned about what leadership is communicating, because if they don't step up and do what they're supposed to do, then we're gonna keep on falling by the wayside. And we can be as pissed off as we want with the Jewish community, but I can tell you one damn thing, hurt one of them and see how many of them turn out at that precinct. You do something disrespectful to those individuals and what have you, when you don't do something that they ask you to do, guess who's not going to get reelected because you depend on their votes? If we as a black community and brown community came together like that, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Facts. Phil, I want to ask you a question. What made you be that supervisor that you were? Like Tony said, you always had an opening door policy to my uncle. You were able to do that. What made you be that supervisor?
Well, there's a lot of people in the police department who are like that. So
I'm not saying it isn't, but I was just asking about you because I ain't got him right here.
No, well, what happens is that it's I learned early on, and I guess the origin was my father. There's a different way to police. You know what I'm saying? Like people used to say, they used to go to training and say, well, we're going to train you how to look to see whether the guy's carrying a gun. And I'm like, meet enough people in the community, they'll tell you who's carrying the guns. That whole thing, if they're coming off the curb, and I mean, it was part of the training, was fine. So there's an element that the community is a proverbial 6-man. And they've been saying for years, put us in, put us in, put us in. And we're going back to the old stars looking for that success over and over again. So I don't know, it definitely wasn't promoted within the police department because there was nothing that I could ever do that could reach the community that was going to curry favor with you advancing within the police department, or you getting favorable assignments, or you advancing. That's not something that was valued. So what we have to look at, and then break it down to very simplistic terms, and I don't think it is that difficult to do, is you have to define what does the police department define success as? And they define success as keeping crime down. That's success. Those metrics have to be altered, have to be changed. So they will deal with these incidents that pop up. They'll deal with the disrespect because the metric is I have to keep crime down. And once you get a so-called, I don't even know what the word progressive means, but when you get Mayor in who basically, I mean, this is a personal opinion, he has shown, quite frankly, I can say anything I can to the black community. I can say anything or do anything because they're not going to support me and not make those critical changes that need to be made. We have to determine that, listen here, I'll break it down to a very simplistic term. A sergeant's on the promotional list, he's ready to make a lieutenant. His squad could have 1 million civilian complaints, 1 million force complaints, 1 million corruption complaints, the sergeant will make lieutenant. The system is wrong because it's not even designed to say, as a supervisor, what did you or did you not do, right, to be able to vet some of that stuff out. So the police department has to do it overall because we're playing from a playbook from 1980s and 1990s. And it will still derive the crime reduction if, in fact, you make that a success. Do not focus on the average officer. They are not the problem. It is the system and it is the brass who are paid to make these mistakes. And I say this all the time. I was consider myself to be very much a disciplinarian, but it was so easy for me to say to a police officer when you were not doing your job, how many arrests, how many summonses, how many stops, all of the basics. But for a boss, what's the criteria? What's the criteria for the borough commander? What's the criteria for chief patrol? See, we sat behind on this ivory tower, and it was very easy to point fingers. You're not doing this, you're not doing that, because I didn't have defined metrics on whether what I was doing my job. And if you define those metrics for those supervisors, you're going to find that the quality of the officers, the agency will change overnight. And once again, this is something I believe, they don't know how to change it. And that's fine. That's fine. But the question is, if you don't know, then you need to seek and you need to listen when you hear the truth. Now, if you turn it down, now we can fault you. Right now, we have the power to be able to go to the police department with solutions on how we can change the culture. And I think that we can make a lot of progress there. But it's the bosses and the structure, not the individual officers that are the problem.
Bill, to the chief's point, let me just add this. I'm sorry.
To Phil's point.
One of the problems but I realize that, what's happening right now, the police department don't know who the leaders are. So they're getting contacted by everybody who gets an opportunity to get behind a microphone and act like they're some type of damn community activist. And that's who keeps calling them and sticking them up saying, we want to sit down and talk. But when they go in there to talk, they don't bring back no information to the community. So at the end of the day, it's for their own self-gratification to make themselves feel important. So you got individuals out here now who are playing, I'm the president of Black Lives Matter, or I'm this person, or I'm that person. And none of those people are out there at the best interest of our people, because they're all being compensated and paid for, because this is what they do. Keep the tension going in our community with the police department so we can get these lawsuits going. And that's what they're doing with this Jewish lawyer in our community.
You talked extensively. Our family has always been taught. I mean, I was brought up to, if you ever got lost or something happened, go tell a police officer. They don't do that now. You and I talk extensively about how to interact with a law enforcement person. Can you just give some insight what you feel from your standpoint of how you do when people call you all the time and try to complain about this and complain about that, and you break it down on, well, did you do this or do that? Just give your insight on how you feel people should conduct themselves in regards to the law, or you can comment on anything else you wanted to say, you heard.
Hey, well, when I got complaints, and Phil will tell you, I went straight to the top. Didn't matter who it was, and all the chiefs and everybody knew who I was, and they knew I was coming for a good reason. What Tony had said before, when rookies come in, they come to Manhattan North, and you may have 300 or 400 coming to Manhattan North, right? We go to usually at Riverside Church and we talk to them. Community people talk to them about what the community is about. I not only did that, but I talked to them in the precinct. One of the things that happened with Dwayne Montgomery and myself, when we first started sensitivity training in Harlem, and they understood how well it was going, the brass got every rookie, and Phil will tell you, that graduated, they did a whole day in Harlem. They came to the state office building for rollout, and they went to the Apollo. And after that, they went into the community, walked with people in the community, talked to people in the community, trying to understand what the community is about, regardless to what borough they was going to be working in. They started doing this after we started sensitivity training. But the whole idea is this: if there's a problem, and I need to talk to somebody, I'm going to talk to them. If I needed to go to Phil's office, I'm going to Phil's office. I'll call him and say, I'm coming down because I have a problem. And when Phil was Manhattan North, he was commander for Manhattan North. If I had something with the chief of the department, and Phil would tell you, they took care of what needed to be taken care of. That's only if you're serious about what you do. And it was never personal with me. It was about my community and people in my community that I care about, and I care how they live and how they're being treated. And true elected officials don't really care. They say they do, but I've yet to find the elected officials go down to City Hall and say, we have a problem in my community.
That's deep. You know, it's so funny, I think, can't say it any better. If we don't work with the elected officials, and elected officials, we don't hold them accountable to what we feel and what we want them to do. And there's always going to be a disconnect. Gena, I'm going to ask you a question real quick. Just delve into the mind of an officer on patrol, how you handle interacting with your community and where you work at. Gena, I know we worked at the 2-6 before you went to narcotics, and then I went back to the 2-8, and then I went to narcotics. But Chet, just talking about how did you take on your patrol mentality when you started working or transit or the community?
Gigi?
Oh, okay. Well, in the 2-6, it was, you just got to know your community. I talked to everybody. Back then, you know, coming on the job, we didn't make much money, so I had to take the train to work. So on my way to work, I would walk through the community and say hi to everybody. Hey, how you doing? I got to know the people on my beat. I would talk to them on my way in. You had a friendly, I guess, relationship with them. Even the dealers, when I hit the corner, they'd be like, oh, geez, out. You know, and they gave me respect, and they go across the street or they leave my beat. You know, oh, you're here 4 to 12? Okay, bye. You know, so it was like, you had a friendly, I guess, patrol civilian relationship with them, a cop to civilian relationship. You know, I always spoke. You have to speak because these are the people that are going to have your back out there. You never know when you're going to get in a situation and they're going to have to make that call for you, because back then, you know, we had those big radios and they didn't work that well. So you didn't rely on the community to help you. You made friends with the kids. What is it for me to go to the ice cream truck and some kids don't have money to buy ice cream, and I'm like, okay, here's ice cream. You know, that's what these cops are missing. They're not friends with the community. You have to relate with your community, especially, I mean, in Harlem, that was the best place they could have put me. You know, when they told me I was going to the 2-6, I was like, where's the 2-6? Like, I had no idea where I was going because I had asked for like the 4-7. I was like,
But
okay,
you know what's so
I'm in
funny?
Harlem, I'm good.
Let me just piggyback off what you're saying, and Phil, I'm sure, and Chet, we walking, and you already know this. I still live in Harlem. You know, my residence is still in Harlem. But the thing about that is that I say hi to police officers, wave at them. Some have the mentality of, and some may wave back. I think it's a personality case by case. But the thing is, officers have to think that, you know, you're still there to protect and serve.
Yes.
Like, I saw an officer the other day, Malika and I were walking, and a little kid was on the bike, and the little girl went up to the white cop, and she was riding the bike, and the white cop, he was just like waving at the little girl, saying hi, and the little girl was kind of taken back, and then the mother was like, you know, like, and then, you know, he was like, and then she started waving, and I thought it was so 1970 or you know, whatever year. I think that is missing now. I think officers are kind of disgruntled for whatever reason. They feel like can't do their job. I don't know what you think your job is, because I always thought patrol was the easiest part of working. You know what I'm saying? Because either it's an absolute arrest or it's a sociology situation. I mean, Phil, I'm gonna let you comment on that, but Chet, just give me a little quick insight on how your patrol life was, or, you know, interacting with your community.
Well, the community, the transit was, you know, it was transit. You was on the train, you was what they call it. You know, you commanded the respect of that situation at the time. So you didn't really get to, you know, except for school time or whatever, you see the same people, and you had the respect because you gave the respect. But when we moved to the narco and we were investigators, and I keep referring to G because, yeah, that's my girl right there. I mean, we did some, you know what I'm saying? And we got it stuff.
You got it done.
What did we used to do, G? We used to, on our own time, we used to go to community, what do they call it? The community
meetings.
Community meetings on our own time, dude. We was in the 4-5. We go to something for the 4-7 or whatever we can, wherever we were working at the time. And we sit there and we'd have people come up to us and go, well, we got a situation here. We know who you are now. This is what the situation. We see you out here. We'll call you. We had people faxing us information on our desk. I mean, we tried to get, and this, we didn't go back to, you know, the bosses or anything. Well, we doing this and that. We did it on our own time, and we tried to, how you say, I don't know if it's reap the benefits. The benefits were we were doing what we were supposed to do. We were patrolling. We were getting it done, and we weren't hurting anybody, and we were stopping people from hurting each other.
And that's a beautiful thing. That I'm gonna let you finish, but I want the panel all to chime in after that, because that is community policing at its finest. You know what I'm saying? You're not going to get officers to do that. We all know that. Like, you guys went beyond the Call of Duty. You enjoyed working with each other. But you understood that it's something you do. If you're not finished, if you finish, Chad, then cool. If you're not, I'm gonna let you finish. But then, Phil, I want you to comment on what he was talking about. Go ahead.
I'm good. It's just that we just did what we had to do, and we tried to reach out. And like I said to her, like I said earlier, we became social workers, because when we did catch somebody, we're in the corner of the cell. Yo, dude, why are we out here like this? What are we doing? Sometimes we get to kiss my ass. Sometimes we get, I know. She could attest to that. She's had a couple of people, turn it over, go to college, or whatever the case was. Some people look at us like, really, dude? And some people look like us, really, dude? So that's the deal right there.
Yeah, I'm going to go to you, Phil, then Willie, and then Tony. Go ahead, Phil.
You know what, Chet? I think what you said was so significant, and maybe we're both wrong in our analysis of this. But I think you're talking about a real simple change, right? If the police department was serious, or if they knew, they were gonna the key stakeholders in the community, and you start a very simple program. They wanted to push out there every time you see a police officer, say, "Hello, officer. Good day, good morning, good afternoon." And every officer now that we're going to be training, we're going to be instructing them to speak to everybody that they're dealing with, everybody they're walking by. Now, you just think about that for a second. One simple thing: the police officer sees the same people every single day. It's the same routine every single day. And the people in the community see that same officer. If you started with something very simple, is that we were going to push from the community perspective, and they were going to push just saying hello, 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 hello. The next day, it's hello, officer. The next day, it's hello, Gena. And guess what happens? Right now, you start realizing that guy there is not the bad guy or the bad girl. They may look the same. They may talk the same. And that's some of the differences that the law enforcement has never been able to figure in our community. The bad guy and girl looks like the good guy and girl. And there's no way that they can differentiate between the two, nor have they been trained, or nor there's a value to it. But once you start talking, now it's like, are you keeping warm? Now it's like, are you keeping safe? And all of a sudden now, from a grassroots perspective, people get to know each other. They realize who the ones who the problems are. And when I say the problem, they realize now the ones that I need to take you home, because I know who your mother is, because your mother speaks to me and I speak to your mother. And then they know that he's the one that we need to take enforcement action about. And Chad, I'm gonna tell you something. It starts as simple as that, but it takes the leadership from the mayor, it takes leadership of the police commissioner to say, we're gonna grab these stakeholders, we're gonna have a campaign, and it's gonna be say hello. Now what happens is that you got narcotics now. You think these people in our community want these people flushing these drugs in our community? They're gonna be telling Chet and Gena, these are the people here. All that stuff that we gotta do, we gotta spend all this money out figuring out. If you develop those relationships, they're going to tell you, because they want to root that out in the community. So, Chad, I really applaud you on that, because that's something I've always felt very strong about. Is something as simple as saying hello on both ends of the equation. And once you get to know each other, we're going to realize 99% of the officers and 99.9% of the people in the community, they actually want the same thing. And that 1% of those officers who aren't doing well, and that percentage of the people in the community who are having, we're all going to identify that. And then all of a sudden, we're going to be able to build to that. So that's something that I'm going to throw out there. That is a panel. That's something we could start a movement.
With sincerity. Sincerity. You got to be sincere with this. You can't just throw it out there, boss. You just can't. Yeah, whatever. Hey, what's going on?
No, we're going to rock. We're going to rock with it.
Yeah.
Chet, you know what, Chet? But there's more Chets out there, right? And when you did it without even being told to do it or instructed to do it, you were very sincere.
That's what I'm talking about. You got to be sincere with what you're doing. You just
and there's people out there that will be sincere, and the ones who aren't, on both sides of the equation, they identify themselves. And once the rotten apples identified, listen, we all know how to deal with that particular person to comply, and culture forces them to acquiesce properly. So,
and it's funny. I'm gonna turn to you, real quick, and then I'm gonna let you finish out, Tony. You've always talked about how you supported the police officers. You let everybody know that, but you also, too, hold them accountable. It's just like the other day when we were out there safe distancing, and the officer coming behind you, and the community officer just wanted to come and acknowledge you. And that's not just because of who you are, but it's also because and he knows that you are a believer of what he does. Can you just elaborate a little bit on how you feel you support the community, or what you do to support the community, or what people should do in supporting their police officers?
Well, you know what? Everything that you're saying now is that they got NCO officers now, right? The NCOs are coming to community council meetings, right? They're giving their cell numbers, right? These are NCOs in each sector. They have two NCO officers, right? That when you call them, you could call them direct and they come to your house if you got a problem. Or they come and do whatever needs to be done if you have a problem. Train all the officers to be like the NCOs. And what you having NCOs do now, all officers should be doing. If there's an NCO officer, if you have a problem like noise in your block, you call your NCO officer. You have his cell number. He'll come out, he'll talk to you direct. You have his name. If you go to the community council meetings, which a lot of people don't go to because they don't know about it, but they should because it's in your precinct. You'll find out a lot about who the officers are that you can talk to and deal with. So if they train all the officers to do the things that the NCO officers are doing, it's the same thing that you said, you know, you come and talk to people and you do things off duty. You went to the community council meetings on your own. All officers should be doing that. So give them the tools to do what you're giving NCO officers the tools to do. And just don't say I'm doing for these 8, 12 officers are the best in the precinct, and they're considered the best in the precinct. That's why they're NCOs. Make all of them feel like they're the best and hold them accountable to what you want them to do.
Yeah. And Friday night, we went to meet the new chief of housing on a Friday night. So, you know, it takes both parts. Either we got to do our part as a community to meet, to step out and not say, oh, it's a Friday night, I don't want to meet him. And it's a Friday night, he came out to meet us. So that's real. Tony,
we don't live in the project.
Exactly.
But he took Secreto's job, and it was our job to go and see what he was like and what he was about.
Yes.
And let him know how we feel. And people in the community, we have a job to do. And our job is to take care of our community. And the only way you can do that is to be informed and get out there. You can't stay in the house and look at TV and hope somebody else go do it. You have to do it. We all have to do it.
Thanks. Tony, how you feel, brother? You got unmute. You muted. Tony, unmute yourself.
All right, brothers. I said I was so engaged in getting educated, I got lost in it.
And that's a beautiful thing. We just, you know, what's so funny, Tony, and Tony and I have a long history from the promotional world into this position that we've both taken on in life, and it's just spreading knowledge, and I appreciate everything that he's doing. So, Tony, like, what is your thought process, or what do you suggest you tell your people in your community, or people in just a community, how to have a better relationship with law enforcement?
Well, I think it starts with telling law enforcement how to have a better relationship in our community, first and foremost.
Okay.
And then, you know, I've listened to earlier when Chief Banks was on my broadcast, and now here on his broadcast, and he's been pretty consistent in his messaging. The bottom line is, first and foremost, we have to get back to the thought process. First and foremost, and I think I said it earlier, the police department don't know who their friends are. And on top of that, they don't know who the community leaders are, because everybody wants to be a leader. Like I said, once they get in front of a microphone, all of a sudden they've arrived. You get one press story, and all of a sudden you're important to everybody. And that's just what it is. Unfortunately, the tool, and just to digress for a second, the tool of media was primarily utilized because politicians weren't doing it, well, still aren't doing their job. So when you saw me on camera, it was because I needed an ally that was going to push the button to make people do their damn job. And when the worst thing you can do to somebody who works in government is put their ass on blast, because all of a sudden things start getting done. Right. So that was my tool, and that was what I used as my advocacy tool. So I say this to say right now, the solution is, and I said, Chief Banks said it a couple of times, and you know, I've been on the same page with him thinking this. First and foremost, Dermot Shea and all of them, you know, minus this dumbass mayor we have. I'm sorry, because everybody know I don't really care for him, and because he's a part of the problem. He's initiated the process because he's too busy poking out his chest doing battle with Cuomo to show that he is New York. He's the man in New York. But that has led his misguided leadership to actually push away from what we need to be establishing. So we in a community need to step up, identify key stakeholders that can communicate the messages back in our community. We sit down with these officers, come up with a strategy, and we bring them in the community, and we have our own town halls, and we have the conversation so they can hear from our young people who everybody talk about they represent, but never give them the microphone to talk. So I think this is an opportunity for us to do just that. Galvanize all of the leadership in law enforcement. We go into an auditorium, however we can do it. The problem, but here's our problem: COVID and social distancing. That's the big issue right now. The thought process would be that we would be in a town hall style thing where our young people, our community people can ask the questions of the police department and manifest a dialogue that at least coming out of there, we march out with some best practices, rules that allow us to move forward and become a better community unified, opposed to being, policed and enforced negatively and looked upon as a community that's separate from New York when we're not. We're all New York, and we should all be treated the same.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate that. I would ask for some parting comments, but I think he did do some parting comments. So what I want to ask out to everybody else in your parting comments, should law enforcement be involved in the social distancing? And two, just give people some words of advice from a law enforcement standpoint or activist standpoint. And I'll start with you, Chad, and then I'll go to you, Gena, and then I'll go to you, and then I'll go to you, Phil, and I'll let you fill it out. Go ahead, Chad.
No, they shouldn't unless it just gets out of hand. You're there. Law enforcement, you're there to monitor the situation. You're not there to escalate it. You're there to de-escalate and monitor. There's no reason why you're sitting there enforcing a 6-foot rule, but you're up in these cats' faces with no mask, on top of them, breathing, and you're just violating everything that you're trying to enforce. It makes no sense. No, shouldn't be. I'm not the chief. I'm not even an Indian, but daggone. No.
Well, you were at one point, though.
No, you shouldn't. You monitor the situation like every other thing. That's what it's patrol. You keep going around the block. You patrol your area. You see something that's out of hand, deal with it. That's what you're here for. Not to escalate. De-escalate, man. No, you shouldn't.
Gena?
Yeah, no, we should not be involved in this 6-foot rule thing. It's not for them to do. I mean, it's not a law. Nobody's breaking the law. You're going to arrest them because they're not 6 feet apart. Like, what are you really going to do? And in the inner city, like you said, my backyard is the curb. My outside, my beach is in front of my building. So they have to be a little more understanding with this, or learn how to ask in a better way. You can't demean or make somebody feel like they're less than and expect them to follow what you're asking them to do. You can make a suggestion, hey fellas, how about you put some mask on, just for your safety, something nice. Right. Or here's some mask. You don't have a mask. I have a mask in my car. Would you like one? Yeah. Bring it that way. But to tell somebody to go in the house, look, I'm a cop, and I'd be like, nope. Mm-hmm. And I would have said a few more words than that. Yeah, I would have said a few more words than that. And no, you don't. You just don't. You talk to people the way you want to be talked to. You treat people the way you want to be treated.
I think that's the easiest way.
If they do that, I think it'll all go smooth.
Yeah. Tony, I'm gonna let you chime in on that question. I didn't, and then I'm gonna go to my uncle, and then I'm gonna let Phil finish out. Should police be involved in social distancing?
No. Okay. No. That's it. No.
All right, good.
You can't enforce something that's not enforceable. People are going. You talk about 6 feet. You're not going to measure it. You're gonna guess you're 6 feet apart from each other. I don't think that's law enforcement job to do that. I think we're free to do it if we want to, which is wrong if we don't. But I don't think it should be a law enforcement rule or law.
Okay, appreciate it. Bill, I'm gonna let you finish it out, and I'm gonna bring it home after you, brother.
You got it. But first of all, man, I do appreciate you inviting me on this panel, and I certainly salute my fellow panelists. I learned a lot from a lot of you. I'm actually sitting here with an individual who worked with you guys in narcotics and for transit. I won't mention his name.
All right. Short space, Phil. Short space.
That's what's up, baby. It's a good day.
I do think that, yeah, Chet, when you talk about transit, he was going there like this, transit.
Yeah, he's feeling that transit love.
Yeah, he's feeling that transit love. No, I think that there's a role from an educational perspective, but certainly not one from an enforcement perspective. The bigger issue is that whether it's social distancing or whether it's any type of enforcement, you know, the root cause is that there's just a barrier between policing our communities. But we do, from an educational perspective, I can see some of the cops out there from education who say, hey, listen here, we need to do this. From enforcement, absolutely not. I don't think that should be the role of the police department. And I learned a lot today, and I just wanted to take my hat off to my panel here.
Thank you. Appreciate everybody for
Thank
being
you.
here. Well, I'm going to close it out. Well, first and foremost, let me just say this. This was not here to bash law enforcement. How can I bash something that pays me? I enjoy doing what we did. And what I did, I've met some beautiful people, the panelists right here. My uncle, of course, Tony and I, we knew each other before that, but Bill, Gena, Chet, like I worked the front lines with these officers. So for my other officers out there that are listening to us, this was not about bashing. I implore you, if you got something to say, please, Black, Latin, whoever you are, inbox me. If you're my Facebook friend, you can reach me. I would love to have you on the panel to chop it up and talk about what you feel, how you feel. You may have another insight that we missed. I mean, there's so much that we can get in an hour and a half, but the beautiful thing about this is all about talking about how we become better people and a better police department. So it's not about always denouncing. We can denounce what we saw or what we feel a person did. It is what it is. We're going to call it a spade a spade. So don't ever think that, listen, we are unapproachable or we can't be discussed. Because we can be discussed, and it is what it is. We all make mistakes. And we realize that sometimes one individual tarnishes the whole department from East Coast to West Coast, which we spent a lifetime after that trying to rekindle and replenish that whole ideology. Let me tell you something on behalf of Real Talk Chronicles. Tomorrow, my wife is having an in-depth conversation with some ladies in small businesses. That's a little ladies round table. After that, we'll have some other stuff for you. But on my panel, I appreciate you all. Thank you so much for giving us your time. My wife is coming in to say goodbye to you guys. But I appreciate you. Thank you. Share it. If you liked it, please share it with people. I implore you to go back in and look at all the comments and questions, because there was some real dialogue that I think a lot of you all it's been addressed to a lot of you individuals. And I think you need to go back in there and answer it. I couldn't answer it all because they were coming fast and furious. But I'm Bill Forster on behalf of Real Talk Chronicles, Malika Forster. We love you all. Stay safe, stay quarantined, protect yourself. Panel, don't hang up yet. We're just getting off this line right now. Thank you, everybody. Facebook, we see you in a minute.
And Phil, we playing golf.